Hi, everybody. Thanks for attending today's webinar, Real World Cloud, brought to you by NetSync Network Solutions. My name is Jason Stegent. I will be your moderator for today's session. You'll see right there John Getty. He's our key presenter, keynote speaker, if you will, for today. John is the Data Center Practice Manager at NetSync Network Solutions, and he's going to cover today's topic. A few housekeeping notes before we get started to make the best use of everybody's time. Today's webinar should last anywhere from 45 to 50 minutes, so it's not going to be too long. We are recording today's session, so if you weren't able to join us, you'll be able to see what you missed. You'll get an email from us in the next 24 hours on how to access the on-demand version. If you are joining us, thanks again. You'll get that email as well, be able to reinforce what you learned. We are going to end with a live Q&A session at the end. If you have any questions, you'll see the Q&A box is underneath the speaker box. Simply type in your questions, click submit. We'll answer as many of your questions as we can at the end of today's webinar. A few notes regarding the environment that you're in. One of the questions we always get is, hey, I want to view the slide deck. I want to make it bigger. All the windows that you see have min-max options. If you want to view that slide deck in full screen mode, just maximize it, and boom, you're off and running. There is no dial-in for attendees. You're going to be hearing this through your PC speakers or through the speakers of your mobile device. The media player defaults to about 75% volume. If the audio is still not loud enough for you for whatever reason, if you're in a cubicle-based environment, whatever, headphones are recommended. If you look at the bottom, you'll see a number of icons that enable you to do a number of different things. You can share this through social media channels, email out of the platform. If you want to invite some colleagues of yours that you think would get value out of today's presentation. If you have any questions from a technical support perspective, you'll see that FAQ window as well. And then finally, we have a resource icon. NetSync is hosting a few pieces of content in that resource icon section. It's the one that looks like a paperclip. Just click on that. You'll be able to download that content to make this presentation even more value-centric. But with that being said, and without further ado, I'm now going to hand the floor over to John. John's going to go over real-world cloud and what it means to the marketplace today. John, take it away.
Thanks. As you said, my name is John Getty, and I'm the practice manager here with NetSync. One of the quick things I wanted to make sure to tell everybody is kind of who NetSync is. NetSync consists of several practices. They're very specifically chosen to ensure that we can deliver a full suite of services from design to implementation and even operational management if needed. Each practice consists of dedicated pre-sales and implementation engineering staff. The data center practice, which is the one I run, is currently responsible for solutions in general data center, cloud, and virtual desktop. NetSync employees specialize in each area that allow the company to deliver turnkey solutions for customers pretty much of any size. One other practice I wanted to highlight here, because it's going to be specific to cloud, is the cybersecurity practice specializes in defending customers' sensitive networks and data resources. The team consists of engineers that spend at least 10 hours a week practicing what we call offensive security to ensure NetSync is prepared to defend against the latest security threats both in the data center and in the cloud today. With that said, let's move on to the presentation. Real-world cloud. So we get these kinds of questions a bunch, so let's go over the topics real quick that we're going to cover. First, we're going to define the scope of what is cloud, how big is it. We get this question a lot, and I think there's a lot of confusion, so we have a few slides that are going to go through that. The next one is how much should you expect to pay for the cloud? This seems to be a lot of confusion in the things. We have a lot of people who think that they can go to the cloud and it's immediately going to save them money. Many customers struggle with the financial forecasting in the new world of cloud, and we think it helps to see an example. It will normally allow customers to wrap their thinking around paying for everything instead of in an operational cost model instead of a capital cost model. Sometimes this type of operational cost model can be pretty shocking to some customers if they're not paired literally from day one to control what we call cloud sprawl and costs. Next, we're going to move into security in the cloud. We're going to quickly discuss one of the most difficult and often most forgotten aspects of the cloud, security. In recent years, there have been many high-profile data breaches, and many of them have occurred in a public cloud. If data, we like to think of it this way. If data is the new economy, then stealing data is the most profitable thing a hacker can do. There are many websites you can search for. I can reference one further in the presentation. It'll show you exactly what has happened over the last couple of years in the public cloud. NetSync thinks it's important, everybody needs to acknowledge the need for security, and furthermore, the need for a vigilant security team to defend against the bad actors that are out there actively looking to steal data. Security should always be considered before the first workload is put into the cloud. And then finally, we're going to go spend some time discussing hybrid cloud vision. Hybrid cloud is certainly the new marketing term that all vendors have been using for the last 6 to 8 months. We'll discuss what this may mean for your company and your cloud strategy. And we're going to review NetSync's view of the current state of technology and how long we think it will actually take to realize the future of a true hybrid cloud. So let's get started. All right, what is the cloud? We get this question a bunch. We actually ask this question to our customers. So the questions that we ask is, what is the cloud? What do you think when someone tells you their company uses the cloud? When we speak with our customers, here are some of the answers we get. A lot of times people say the cloud is AWS or Azure or Google or IBM software. They think that the cloud is a provider. Sometimes from engineers, we get, well, the cloud is just someone else's data center. Sometimes we get from a lot of people, especially CEOs, the cloud is a sales tool used to convince organizations to stop building their own data centers. We hear this a lot from CIOs and CTOs who are very budget conscious. Sometimes people just say there are only two kinds of clouds. There's public cloud and private cloud. Sometimes they say, well, the cloud is just either a business process as a service, it's platform as a service, it's all the as a service things. We hear these acronyms shown a lot, especially in marketing materials, and we want to try to clarify a little of some of those. Some people think it's a set of automation and processes. Some people think it's auto-scaling infrastructure. Specifically, most of the big clouds use that kind of term to differentiate their cloud from someone else's cloud. And the most recent thing that's happening is the programmers have all gotten involved, and they think that cloud is essentially the rewriting of all software to containers, Docker, Kubernetes. These are probably words that you've heard. And there is a lot of that going on. The question that we have is, which one is right? And we would tell you it depends on the perspective of your organization and what you're trying to do with the cloud. The first thing we want to do is talk about how big the cloud is. These numbers come from Gartner, and they're kept every year about all the different things that the cloud is doing. As you can see, they categorize the cloud into about 6 different spots. The interesting thing I wanted to point out, and what most people don't understand, is the cloud, which in all of its greatness and all the advertising we hear, is literally that. 40% almost of the cloud is advertising. I mean, let that sink in for a second. Most of the revenue that the cloud produces is from those little ads that sit on the right-hand side and the top of your screen that are there and you probably never look at. And advertising for something. So 39.4% of all the revenue produced in the cloud in 2017 was for advertising. It had absolutely zero direct business function at all other than to generate revenue for the people hosting the ad. So I always want to stop there and make sure that people really understand that. All right, so software as a service is the next category, and you can see it's a huge job. Software as a service is things like Office 365, the Oracle Cloud, who's offering Oracle as a service, that sort of thing. Infrastructure as a service. This is a lot of times what people think of when they're thinking of like an Amazon or an Azure, where they can go and they can receive an infrastructure like a networking infrastructure or maybe a platform, and then spin up their own servers as if they were running a data center virtually out of a particular cloud. And then business process as a service. This is one that a lot of people don't think of, but there's certainly an entire category out there consisting of almost a little over 14% of the cloud. Everything else makes up less than 8% of the revenue of the cloud. So this is a good way to think about what is the cloud. So let's go and look at one more. Let's look at the infrastructure that is the cloud. So if you want to think about the actual servers and networking infrastructure and storage infrastructure that gets purchased, here's a good one. IDC keeps track of this particular one. And so this has been tracked for many years now, going all the way back to 2015. And that section in the middle is the public cloud. And yes, I would acknowledge it's growing, but I would also acknowledge that that section above it, the red one and the blue one below it, is what we call private and traditional data center. So private cloud, which is generally someone's data center who's put into like a hosting provider, a cloud that you only have access to. It's not public. And then traditional data center. So if you add those two together, while the public cloud is growing, it is certainly not the lion's share of data center or data center infrastructure that's being installed. And even the big analyst firms don't predict that to happen for quite some time. So this goes all the way to 2021. And traditional and private cloud infrastructure are still going to make up more than 60% of the market. So let's look at one other metric. Who has the biggest and most popular public cloud? Like clearly, and probably most people would have guessed, the most popular cloud is AWS. They have been that way for quite some time. They will probably be that way for a long time to come. There are entire certification tracks built around AWS. They've done a very good job of marketing, developing the resources that they need, and developing engineers to train and specialize in AWS infrastructure. The interesting thing is that Microsoft, which is Azure, has made a big leap in the last year. They are not going to go away, and they're going to end up, in a lot of people's opinion, a two-horse race between AWS and Azure. And then Google will be, in most cases, a distant third for quite some time, is specializing in certain areas. And then everyone else is falling behind. IBM Cloud, which is called software, which has been bought and sold a few times now by different organizations, the Oracle Cloud and DigitalOcean, those make up smaller fractions of the rest of the cloud. Okay, so now we have a better idea what the cloud is. Let's talk a little bit about some of the real cost here. So let's just talk about the reality of the cloud. And when I talk about costs, I'm talking about financial cost, the cost of risk, that sort of thing. So let's just put down some rules here, some kind of ground rules, and just kind of go through. Public clouds, they're not perfect. So here's the reality. They all have service outages. Many customers come to us and say one of the reasons they want to go to the cloud is because it's more dependable than the data center that they can run. I would say if you're running your data center using normal ITIL processes or other well-developed government processes that are out there to run your data center with, your cloud may be better than the public cloud because it's specific to your organization. You have very direct control and a few other things. But the reality is that public clouds do have service outages. It's very easy to Google that sort of thing. There have been major service outages that caused disruption into very large companies for the last few years. There's actually a really great site out there that can show some of those things, and I'll put that link in the resource page at the end. Next one, all of the major public clouds have several outages. I already covered that. And then they use the same networking protocol, server storage, power systems, etc. They don't have any strategic advantage over a data center that you could build or anyone else could build, provided that you had enough time and money. So that's an important thing. They follow the same basic security protocols used by governments and large corporations. These protocols are developed, they're free, they're available to anybody to read. The NIST standards and many other standards are out there. You don't need to come up with this stuff yourself. They follow the same rules. They hire from the same talent pool available in the local areas where they do business. Working for a VAR, NetSync has this same issue. There's a certain pool of very, very talented engineers available to hire, and we are constantly looking for people just like all the big clouds are. So it is a very competitive landscape. They're hiring the same people, and in some cases, they're hiring VARs just like us to go and help them outsource some of their work because it's so very difficult to find engineers where those data centers happen to be. They purchase hardware and software from the same OEMs available to most customers. The same OEMs that you have heard of before, all the big ones, including Cisco, they buy from all of them. Same hardware. They don't have any kind of magical gear that makes their network any more or less than a network you could build. And the business and financial risk actually could increase with the adoption of cloud, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in just a second. Okay, the next thing, people need to understand that the cloud is going to make a few people change. So we always want to make sure that people understand that there is going to be a new vocabulary. This appears to be being used almost in a competitive market situation where they throw out lots and lots of acronyms. People don't understand them, and sometimes I feel like people don't want to ask. So we want to put them out there. So we want to make sure that there's going to be confusion, in my opinion, maybe some kind of confusion on purpose for years and years to come as customers learn more about communicating with public clouds and about public clouds with their vendors. You need to acknowledge that training is going to be required. Traditional network servers and skills do not translate directly to public clouds. We have lots of customers who are running pristine data centers and they want to go to the cloud and realize that they need months of training, even with their most highly educated engineers, to understand how to translate what they've been doing into how they might do it on a platform like AWS or Azure. Each public cloud has a slightly different set of offerings, and training will need to happen in both clouds or in any cloud that you want. It's all cloud specific. So if you adopt AWS and you go and you get all your engineers trained for AWS, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to immediately go and say, okay, well, I want to move to Azure, because Azure has different service offerings and different protocols and different storage protocols. There need to be training in each specific cloud that you want to use. Another understanding or misunderstanding that customers have is that the cloud is going to let them get rid of headcount. This is actually put out there by the clouds where they say, you can put everything in the cloud, it's much easier to run it with us, and you won't need as many engineers, and therefore you can save money. We've heard that sales pitch a lot. We've never actually seen that in real life. What we've seen is that network server admins become cloud admins for network and compute. We would generally advise that customers won't be able to remove headcount, and in most cases, they actually hire more staff. Those staff generally stay longer during the transition and sometimes after. So if you think that you're going to save money by getting rid of headcount, it is very unlikely that that will happen. If you hire an outsourcing company to do it, they can do it for you, but the expense is still there. Almost everything has a price tag. This one gets everyone. Everything except the automation tools used to provision new services costs something. Just really want to make that point. Everything costs money. It is not like a normal server where you can put multiple applications on a physical server and not have to pay the incremental capital cost because you're just utilizing the server more. If you want additional space, you're going to pay for it. If you want an additional IP address, you're going to pay for it. If you want to log what your servers were doing, you're going to pay for that, and you're going to pay for the space to keep the logs. If you want to secure anything, you're going to pay for all that. Just understand that anything that you touch, provision, look at, do in the cloud is going to cost you money. And so that brings me to my final point on this set of slides. Actively monitoring cost is critical. costs can easily exceed 20 to 50% of initial estimates if scope of the project is not closely monitored on a weekly and monthly basis. We see so many customers we get to after they've made this journey to the cloud. They've been in the cloud for anywhere from a few months to a year. And they report that the cloud is now costing them 3 to 5 times as much as it was to do themselves. This is very common. We've actually talked to a couple of people at Gartner about this, and they see the same thing. It's not to say that the cloud can't be just as cost effective, but it has to be run, it has to be controlled, and you have to understand your cost. So let's look at an example of cost. This is a nice little example. It's a very kind of succinct example that I wanted to put out there, and it shows the cost of a server on AWS. Now, everybody has a calculator for this, but AWS has one, and that's the URL for it right there if you want to run your own. But this is just 2 Windows servers with basic, what they call elastic block storage. So basic, just regular storage on the server. 1 Microsoft SQL server with some storage attached to it. And then a few other things that you probably, if you're not in the cloud, you may not realize you need to pay for. Things like S3 storage for your snapshots for your database so that you can back your database up. Things like Route 53 DNS service. So if you would like to provide DNS service for your servers on AWS, you're very likely to use Route 53 to do that. It's not free. AWS Virtual Private Clouds, those actually are free, which is interesting. They're zero, but they go right back to the fact that they are used to provision other services that cost money. So VPNs absolutely will cost you money. If you want to connect to your cloud from your business securely, you will have to have a VPN or what they call a direct connect at AWS, and it will absolutely cost you money. All the public clouds will allow what they call ingress or data upload for free, and if you want to download anything or do anything else, they absolutely will charge you for it, and they won't feel bad about it. Additional IP addresses and bandwidth charges. So we've taken all of those things and we've calculated them into this particular little example just so that we can kind of show kind of what a normal workload might look like and what it might cost. And the interesting thing is that this is a monthly cost and it is $3,000+ a month. And that's going to be every single month to run your SQL server. So think about that. It would be cheaper if you only needed to run this SQL server for a month or two. Absolutely. This would be less expensive than buying a server, setting up storage, installing all your software, and everything else. We have very few customers who do that. Most people who set up some sort of web server with the database back in, they set it up and it's up for years. If you take that and you extrapolate it out just across a year, 2 years, 3 years, you can see that it's going to be a lot more expensive if you're buying it in this way. If you talk to a vendor like NetSync, we can explain to you kind of how you can plan and how you can pre-buy some of these things to save some money. But I would say 90% of the customers, when they first started in the cloud, this is exactly how they buy things. They go in there and they just buy what AWS would call the on-demand pricing schedule. And this is what happens. And this is why a lot of them come back to us and say the cloud is a lot more expensive than we ever thought it would be. Let's go to the next one. Okay, the next big topic called security. Security in the cloud is an interesting one. And it's one that we see as a need for everyone. So I wanted to cover these little points because these seem to be the ones that we run into a lot. We kind of get the statement from customers that we put it in the cloud because the cloud knows how to run things better than we do. Therefore, it's more secure and it's operationally controlled and a few other things. As we already know, we referred to the other slide, that may not be true. But in security, the point of view from security, it absolutely is not true. If you read the agreements between all the major clouds, they all say that they are responsible for the platform that the cloud is providing. So things like the platform services like, in the example of AWS, to just kind of stick with that theme, things that they provide like the ability to get to their platform, the ability to set up services in their platform. Some of the platform services like Route 53 DNS, they may actually have SLAs and security things around. But almost everything else, they're very clear that they do not provide security unless you provide it. So it's important to understand that if you build something in the cloud, it is very similar to building something in your data center. And if you do not put security in it, it won't have security. So just a few little things to understand. The public cloud is not responsible for the security of customer workloads. It just simply isn't. Customer compute instances, customer network instances, customer storage instances, identity management, administrative access to resources, remote network access via VPN or direct connect, your data, which is probably the most valuable thing on this whole list, server configurations, software as a service applications like O365. This one happens a lot. We get this question. Well, we paid for Office 365 as a service. Doesn't that mean that they're backing it up? Absolutely, it does not. Microsoft has multiple subscription levels, and unless you are paying for the correct one, your email is not being backed up. And if something goes wrong and you lose it, Microsoft will be very apologetic, and they will write you a nice email and say, we're sorry, but your email is gone. And we've actually seen customers have that issue. Acknowledge that just because you put it in the cloud, it doesn't mean it's secure, and that you desperately need somebody to come look at your security footprint in the cloud and have an active security posture. And we'll talk about how we might do that in just a second. Okay, so let's get to the hybrid cloud vision. So this is where everybody wants to go. The hybrid cloud is the kind of the nirvana of cloud that most OEMs and VARs and, well, everyone has been talking about for many years now. Somebody who's a brilliant marketing person came up with the hybrid cloud term. Somebody was brilliant to come up with cloud, and somebody did it better and called it hybrid cloud. So the interesting thing is we ask these questions, and kind of now that you've heard all the negative things to cloud, you might be saying, should we actually use the cloud? I would say yes. It depends on your workload. And the next question might be, can the cloud actually cost me more money? And I would say absolutely yes. It can cost you a lot more money if you're not careful. We see this all the time, that there are ways to solve this with better design and workload management, and that's kind of what NetSync's teams help you do. Can a well-designed hybrid cloud actually save you money? Absolutely. It depends on the workload again. Can the cloud be as secure as my private data center? Yes. You have to plan for it. You have to do it from day one. If you open up your data to the cloud, believe me, there are people who are looking. They're being paid. They work in various countries to look for holes in public infrastructure. It's easier for them to poke at your public infrastructure than it is to get through your firewalls in your private data center. They'd love to do it. Can I actually run a hybrid cloud today? The answer is probably not. Your current architecture is probably not ready, but change is coming, and it also depends on the workload. So let's talk about a few things there. What is the hybrid cloud? Two or more connected cloud. That's easy, right? Via VPN or direct connection. So to answer the cloud question, cloud is just anybody's data center. That's kind of the best way to think of a cloud. You have a private cloud, you have a public cloud, any kind of cloud you want to think of. It's a data center running somewhere that you're going to connect. The interesting thing is that we want to get to where we can run our workloads in anyone's cloud, your cloud, AWS, Azure, Google, anything without having to think about it. So essentially we've come to this choice of any cloud in any location with any vendor, regardless of time. This is the ultimate kind of what everybody wants. What is the challenge? The current challenges are this. We have to virtualize all the workloads. There are still some workloads out there that can't be virtualized. We run across them from time to time. The obvious ones are mainframes. If you don't work in an organization that has mainframes, there's still lots of them out there. IBM's still selling them. So virtualized, that's really difficult. There are some very high-end database platforms that are challenging to virtualize right now. And then there are just some vendors who just haven't come to the modern world, and even though their application can be virtualized, for some reason they won't support it in a virtualized environment, although those are fewer every day. Networks have to be stretched between clouds, internal and public. This is probably one of the most interesting ones because there's lots of different ways to extend the network to the cloud. Cisco has an interesting one called ACI, and we'll cover in just a second, which NetSync really likes. It helps do a lot of network virtualization. It kind of solves a bunch of problems, and it's going to eventually provide a true agnostic network virtualization we'll talk about in a second. Storage portability continues to be very technically difficult. Lifting and shifting terabytes or petabytes of data from one cloud to another is just functionally difficult because you have to move the data from one place to another. There are some storage vendors out there who are doing some great work to make this easier on customers, but it continues to be a difficult one. Security implementations are not well designed. Well, we just covered that, and I would just say that they just aren't. Security, read the newspaper any day. There's always somebody being hacked. Bandwidth, cost, and availability is currently a limiting factor for most customers. As we get further into this hybrid cloud vision, the need for high bandwidth, low latency connections on the order of 1 to 10 to sometimes 100 gigabits a second are becoming more and more prevalent. If you have that need, NetSync can help you. We have an entire group that works with that. Modern management techniques are not being used. In a minute, we'll talk about why that is, but it's important to think of services, not servers. And it seems like a simplified explanation, but what we're trying to get to is the modern world will eventually begin to break down their applications, and they will become discrete services. They won't become this Windows server or that Linux server anymore. Traditional system administrators need programming experience. We've seen a divide between the programmers and the network administrators forever. This divide has to be fixed. At NetSync, we're always encouraging network people to take programming classes and programming people to take networking classes. As we move forward, the network will become programming and vice versa. So we need these people to be multi-talented individuals. All right. So how do we get there? We talk to some of our customers, and we kind of very blatantly tell them the first steps to successful hybrid cloud implementations are: one, you need to accept that the cloud is real. We do have customers who are not willing to accept this. The cloud is real. It is a big thing, and most of the industry is either moving in that direction or they're planning to move in that direction right now. If you don't have a cloud strategy, in most cases your competition will, and as the cloud matures, it will become a deficiency in your kind of business strategy. You need to lead your cloud strategy from the CIO, CTO level or higher if possible. We've seen a lot of organizations try to start silos of different IT organizations or different business organizations that want to run their stuff in the cloud. And then what happens is they end up doing their thing in, say, AWS, and someone else does their thing in Azure. They're not coordinated. It ends up costing them a lot of money. Security ends up suffering. We've actually seen in some cases data sovereignty issues where data ends up in another country where the laws don't have such a great advantage for the company that's doing it. There needs to be clear organizational leadership from the top of accepting a cloud strategy. 2 or 3, learn as much as you can. I know everybody's busy. I'm a big advocate of please spend some time training. There are lots and lots of free or inexpensive resources available from independent organizations and OEMs. So if you don't believe your manufacturer, that's okay. It's easy. I can point you to lots of resources. Cisco has great resources. There's good independent resources. There are training classes you can take. All of these things, you need to get a good grasp of what the cloud is, and you need to understand it yourself before your organization starts it. I would suggest you use your VARs and your OEMs. They're desperate to tell you their vision of the cloud and the services and products they can sell. Yeah, that means you have to sit through their sales pitch. That's okay. You can use them for their experts. Let the salespeople do their talking and then look right at the engineers and get the information you need. They're glad to give it to you, I promise. NetSync will do the same thing. Ask everyone that you talk to what failed. You're going to learn more from failure than success. And if you find somebody who says they've gone to the cloud and they didn't have any kind of failure, they either don't want to tell you or they're not in the cloud. Believe me, it's a journey, not a one-day cutover. Ask your own staff what they're already doing in the cloud. If they say they're not doing anything, ask someone else. This is true. Most organizations that I've come across, especially large ones, they're already in the cloud, and if you don't know it, they're just not telling you. And they're doing it because usually a few reasons. One, they just don't want to deal with the IT process, or maybe they thought the cloud was neat. We have seen some where they just signed up for a cloud and they just started building their own applications. So the cloud is something you want to embrace. It's very difficult to defend against it. You want to embrace it and go ahead and accept it. Send your technology staff to accounting school. Boy, this is a big one. Departments need to clearly understand the true expense of cloud services before they start to use them. And I would say we need to capitalize and bold the word before. Departments need a well-designed budget before they order your very first service. Don't proceed without this. Anybody who does, be prepared to pay a lot more than you need to for the cloud services that you're about to use. All right, so let's spend the next few slides talking about kind of structural designs of how we can get hybrid cloud to where we need it to be. On the right-hand side is a Cisco design. It's using Cisco ACI, and so if you haven't heard of ACI, that would be a whole nother discussion. But it is essentially a network virtualization technology. It is not new. It has been around for a long time, and there are lots and lots of good implementations that NetSync can talk to you about if you'd like. But it gives you a true cloud-agnostic, hypervisor-agnostic networking virtualization platform. So let's think about that for a second. When I say cloud-agnostic, what I mean is it doesn't care. It could be your cloud. It can be the public cloud. It can be any kind of cloud. And this is where we're at, right? And it doesn't care about the hypervisor either. It has never cared about the hypervisor. You can use whatever you want. If you're using VMware, that's fine. If you're using Hyper-V, that's fine too. If you're using Red Hat virtualization, that's fine. Any of the major KVM is Red Hat virtual. Yeah, there you go. Any of those will work just fine because ACI is interested in providing the virtualized networking, providing security, and providing access to the various clouds. So where are we today? Today we have hypervisor agnostic solutions working around the world in production, and cloud agnostic design, the ability to move workloads seamlessly from one cloud to another cloud to another cloud is probably 6 to 12 months away. And when I say that, that means without the need to worry about what hypervisor or being locked into any kind of hypervisor at all. We are very, very close. Vendors have been working on this for years, and it really does look good. Multi-site extensions to ACI will finally make this happen. That will allow us to have multiple sites, just like I've been talking about. And the network and security policy will be seamlessly translated between private and public clouds without the need to worry about the underlying cloud infrastructure. This doesn't have to be invented. It already exists. ACI is already providing this with what they call the multi-pod solution and multi-site solution. And all that Cisco is going to do is extend it into the cloud here in the next half a year or so. All right, so let's talk about virtualization for the cloud. A true cloud agnostic compute virtualization. We just aren't there yet. If you want to choose a hypervisor, solutions like VMware can do it as long as you stay in the VMware hypervisor. If you want to not be forced to choose a hypervisor, which I have more and more customers who want that, we are almost there, but we are not there yet. We are probably 6 months away, at the outside, 12 months away from that. Today we can, however, deploy templates to multiple clouds. Cisco Cloud Center templates allow us to provision the same types of workloads independent of any cloud infrastructure. So essentially we can provision workloads that look and act the same today in any kind of cloud you want. Most customers will still need to rely on specific hypervisors until the applications are written to be cloud native. And in the true future, as organizations start to rework their applications, is something called containers and app-based applications. So if you haven't already heard of them, talk to us. We'll talk to you about it. But technologies such as Docker, Kubernetes, AWS Lambda, Azure Cloud Foundations, they will all eventually become commonplace, and they are going to revolutionize the way the world delivers applications. They already are, and they are going to provide one day a true serverless compute environment. And it's going to take organizations rewriting their applications. Some of the most leading edge organizations have already started that process, but this is where it's headed. Managing both types of workloads will be extremely important now, from now on, probably into the next 5 to 10 years as business technology evolves and is just driven into what we call discrete services. The next one is storage for the hybrid cloud. True agnostic storage virtualization. We can do that today. We've been able to do it now for quite some time. It'll depend heavily on your choice of storage vendor. All storage vendors have a little bit different cloud strategies. There are some storage vendors who don't have any. Essentially, they're just telling you to direct connect to the cloud, run your compute in the cloud, and run your storage not in the cloud. I don't know if that's really a cloud strategy as much as just that's their way of doing it. Cisco has a thing called a FlexPod. They've been delivering storage snapshot replication between the multiple clouds since June of 2017. They've been doing it seamlessly. It's allowed customers to have production, test, and dev storage replicated automatically without having to think about it to any cloud, without any kind of human intervention since last year. And then FlexPods using cloud volumes are all now enabled to allow true data tiering. So what everybody has always wanted was this ability to have a primary data store and have that data store recognize when the data is old or cold. And we've had that technology for 20 years in a lot of different places, but it's always been on the same storage system. It's never been to an external storage system in the cloud. The FlexPods today can now offer that. They actually understand what cold data looks like, and they can tier it to things like Amazon and Azure and Google. And without you having to worry about it, and your applications have no idea that the data moved or where it resides, and nor do they care, or does it even matter. So that actually does exist today. And then hybrid cloud security. Cisco has a great true cloud agnostic security. It's called Cisco Umbrella and CloudWatch. If you haven't heard of Umbrella, it used to be called OpenDNS. You've probably heard of that. But it provides a true multi-cloud, multi-service, DNS-based and application-based security. We'd really like to talk to you about how to do this, because when we see people moving to the hybrid cloud, what we see is the security not following your applications. So your applications may be very secure inside your data center. They move into the cloud, and all of a sudden the security just goes away. So let's talk about that. And then the last one is hybrid management. So structurally, the management is really important. We see a lot of management systems that can manage in the cloud, a lot of management systems that can manage in your data center. What you need is one that is cloud agnostic. Cisco does make one. It is a pretty amazing system. It allows you to ensure that you see everything from the data center to the cloud to everything else. So they've actually done a lot of thinking. They've actually acquired a lot of intellectual property to be able to do this. And we'd sure like to be able to do things like secure host your traffic flows, create a normal baseline of what normal looks like, which most people need and a lot of them don't have. And then more importantly, know when things are not normal and be able to integrate and respond into all of your security systems. And then finally is a slide full of information. It's a bit of an eye chart. but I wanted to put these links up here for everybody to have. The first one is a cloud strategy. If you don't have a strategy, Cisco has a great cloud strategy document on how to do that. If you feel like your networking people need help in programming, I've listed a couple of really good Python classes and resources here. Python is kind of the default language that's used in network programming today. There's some good stuff on Cisco Cloud Security. If you want AWS or Azure training, they both have free training. And if you want more advanced certifications and that sort of stuff, they have entire certification tracks. And to wrap things up, just a little bit about NetSync. These are our locations. NetSync has 9 different physical locations, although we cover lots and lots of area. We cover the entire state of Texas for sure, and then we have offices in Florida, Missouri, and California. And we'd sure like to help you with your journey to the cloud. If you just anywhere from starting your planning to the cloud, building your infrastructure for your cloud, or any questions in between, we're certainly here to help. And with that, I think I'll hand it back for any kind of questions.
Thanks, John. Great presentation. We did have a number of questions that came in from the audience, so let's get after those. This first one, John, is coming from Laura. Laura wants to know, John, you spoke about AWS Direct Connect, but we are looking at Microsoft Azure. Does Azure have a Direct Connect option?
So thanks, that's a good question. Absolutely. Azure has one called ExpressPath or ExpressRoute, and as far as all the other public cloud providers, they have Direct Connect options as well. So Google has one called Cloud Interconnect. There are even third-party kind of bandwidth providers who will allow you to connect to a point of presence and then provide you access to all of the public clouds all at the same time. There's even a provider out there called Megaport that will provide a single port that can then be divvied up via a quality of service mechanism to provide access to, say, Azure, AWS, Google, and a number of other public clouds all at the same time with just a single fiber optic connection.
Great. This next one is a question coming in from Larry. And Larry, based on your question, we're going to post this link. Larry said, John, I didn't see the link pointing out the security breaches that you mentioned. Can you please give us that website? You want me to go ahead and post that for Larry, John?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty long link, but it's actually a website called informationisbeautiful.net, and the actual URL is /visualizations/worlds-biggest-data-breaches-hacks. That's why it's better to post the link. It is a really, really interesting website that it visualizes all the recent large data breaches that have gone on. And you'll recognize, you can filter them by industry or the size of the breach. If you are trying to work with your executive leaders and you want them to look at something that is kind of interactive and really engaging about why security is important, this website has worked for me and for NetSync a number of times where we just give them this website and talk through a bunch of them, because most of the networks that are on here are well known. Things like Equifax and Twitter, healthcare organizations like Anthem, and not only does it talk about the size of the hack, but it talks about what happened, and even has a write-up about each one, so people can understand that it's happening every day, and it's happening to really, really large organizations that a lot of people would think have lots of security and are almost impenetrable. They simply are not. So yeah, if we could post that for them, that would be great.
Beautiful. Yeah, just posted it. So there should be a little chat box that came up. That's our chat room feature. Allows you to have, off conversations, I don't want to say off topic, but additional conversations into the webinar going on. But we went ahead and posted it in the chat room. So you should see it again, like John said, informationisbeautiful.net/visualizations/worlds-biggest-data-breaches-hacks/. So it's in there. Click on that. It should give you everything you need. But thanks for the question, Larry. We got another one coming in. This one is from Amber. Amber wants to know, John, in your experience, how much time does it take to migrate to the cloud?
So it's an interesting question. I would say it depends on the workload and depends on your organizational, bureaucracy maybe. Most of our customers, they just kind of walk into the cloud slowly. They pick one type of workload, and we help them make sure it's provisioned correctly so that they can do it in a cost-effective manner, and also so that their end users don't have any sort of interruption or feel like the cloud is worse than what they had before. That sometimes can take several months. And as they start to understand that the cloud really can help them and that their services really will work well, that usually accelerates. I would say most of our customers spend the better part of a year starting, planning, and then doing phased implementations of various services. And then during that time, they find that there are certain services that they just don't want to move to the cloud because of various reasons, perhaps maybe end user perception or data sovereignty. It essentially makes customers stop and think about all of their policies, how they handle their data, and how they protect their data. It's a really good exercise, but I'd say most customers, that process takes about a year.
Okay. We got another one. This one's coming in from Ian. No, I'm sorry. This is Alan. John, this is from Alan. Alan wants to know, John, we are considering moving our server virtualization away from VMware. Can you speak a bit about Red Hat and some of their options? Do you know of any limitations getting to the cloud? This might put in place if we choose to move down this route. So kind of a multiple question for lack of a better term, but I'll let you address it, John.
Sure. So one of the slides that we talked about is this need to get to a kind of hypervisor agnostic world that we're quickly approaching. So Red Hat is definitely a viable option there. Red Hat actually has a product called Red Hat Virtualization that can easily do server virtualization, most of the traditional server virtualization that you come to know in your VMware environment today. We have customers who are moving. They're moving not just to Red Hat, but sometimes to Microsoft-type virtualization. Sometimes they're moving to Zen server-type virtualization. And sometimes they're just moving straight to the cloud. So if you're looking at Red Hat and if you want to feel a little better about it, a lot of the cloud uses, say AWS. They started on using Zen Server to do virtualization, and now they're moving to what's called KVM, which is Red Hat virtualization for consumers. And so there really are no technical limitations around using that as a virtualization engine. And as far as automation, Red Hat has a product called Ansible that is perhaps one of the leading automation tools in the world. So a lot of people who move down that route also look at Ansible to help them automate their data center, their deployments, and their ongoing operations. And that's generally the direction they go when they start to look at Red Hat products.
Awesome. Hey, guys, what we're going to do is we're going to cut the Q&A. There are a number of other questions for John. Everybody, we appreciate you sending in your questions, but just for the sake of time, we're up at about almost 53 minutes. We know everybody wants to be able to get in and out in under an hour. So we're going to cut short the Q&A session. If John didn't answer any of your questions, we had a number of them that came in that he didn't get to, unfortunately. He will answer those questions offline and answer any challenges, any problems, any questions you have around the cloud. And he'll be in touch with you shortly. A few housekeeping notes on the back end, just some general reminders. We've recorded today's session. Be on the lookout for an email in the next 24 hours on how to access the on-demand version. You can reinforce what you learned. If you weren't able to join us live today, you can see what you missed. And as long as you're in this environment, there are a few pieces of content in that resource center, the one that looks like a paperclip. There's a white paper around cloud and data centers, and then there is a NetSync solution overview, more or less a solution brochure. If you want to learn more about NetSync and the ways that they can help you move to the cloud and do it securely, I advise you to download that content. I think you'll get a lot of value out of it. The next NetSync webinar is probably going to be in the late July timeframe, maybe early August. You'll see a promotion for that in the next few weeks, so be on the lookout for that. I'm sure it'll be another great presentation. But with that being said, my name again is Jason Stegent. Wanted to thank everybody for attending today's session. John, great job today. Let's do it again.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Absolutely. Take care. Bye-bye.